man, this is this will be a little bit different than the other interviews we do later, and it's totally relaxed. I don't know if it looks great, we might end up using it in the film, but the primary purpose is just to start to hear the story. And this, I don't know, I thought we'd maybe just kind of keep it conversational, and you'll be helping me out a lot too, because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So, but hopefully kind of through this conversation, it'll help me form the more specific questions that we'll get into, and probably do a second interview, maybe even a third if you're willing. So shit, let's just start.
Just like that? You just want to start just like that?
Yeah.
I'm scared.
I kind of thought, it's sort of like, well, tell me your life story, where and when were you born?
My life story? My God, I don't want that known. Where was I born? Oh, I was born in Louisiana, 1968, at a military hospital. I'm a military brat, so actually all my brothers were born in military hospitals. But for the most part, I wasn't raised in Louisiana. I don't even remember living there. I moved to California in like 72 or so, I believe, somewhere around there. Lived in Rialto, California for a while. Moved back to Mason City in 1975. Moved back out to California, Southern California, with my mom back in 1981. And
then you came back to Mason City.
Came back in 87.
Okay.
1987, I came back for the military. I got a job.
What branch of the military was your dad in?
He was in the Air Force.
Okay. And how many brothers do you have?
I have 3 brothers.
Older or younger?
They're all older.
Okay. So by the time you were, 7 or so, you moved to Mason City for the first time?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Roughly, yeah.
What elementary school did you go to?
Harding.
Harding, all right.
Warren Genie Harding.
Yes.
Awesome
I heard they
school.
tore it down now. It's not even there anymore.
Yeah, they rebuilt a new one. It sucks. I hate it.
Yeah.
I mean, you tear down my school, and it's like, wow. They tear down all the good buildings here in Mason. Anything historical is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Look at downtown.
Did you feel even that young? So you had been in Rialto, you'd moved around a little bit, but mainly you had spent your early childhood in Rialto, California.
Correct.
And then, about second grade, you moved to Mason City?
Yeah, be about second grade, yeah.
Did you notice back then, even as a little kid, can you talk a little bit about what kind of differences you noticed at that time? Like even being a small child, of how different maybe it was culturally in Iowa and California? Or was it all kind of the same?
No, it wasn't even close. But I don't really remember having a lot of thoughts about differences, other than we had winters here and it snowed, which was cool. And it wasn't like hot every single day. It didn't rain all year. But for the most part, going from Rialto, which was high speed, California lifestyle, even then you notice that stuff, because just the things you do with your friends, you're always doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Like we had a train track behind our house. So we used to jump the train and ride the train for miles, and then we'd wait for another one to come back, and we'd jump on the train and ride it back. Well, when you're 7 years old, 6, 7 years old, that's pretty extreme. And then I come back to Mason City, and I'm living in a small house and across from my grandpa, and going to a strange school, and the school systems are set up differently. Out in California, everything's like big, and out here the school's one building.
Yeah.
Or it used to be. It's not so much anymore. I mean, they're a little more modernized, but for the most part, it was a lot different going to school here. A lot better, actually. The school system I thought was a lot better here.
Yeah.
I mean, still do.
Did you make friends quickly, easily?
Yeah, sure. At that age, you make friends with anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you just show up. Hey, there's a new kid. Everybody wants to be your friend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, out here now, California is a different story. You move to California from out here, nobody wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah. So, how old were you then? I'm sorry, when you moved back to California?
I'd be what, 11?
Okay. So then from 11 to what, 19 or so, you lived there?
Till, yeah, exactly, 19. Yeah.
Okay. So did you just go to public high school in Rialto or?
No, actually, when I moved back to California, I moved to Loma Linda. From Loma Linda, I moved to Redlands. From Redlands, I moved to Yucaipa. So I went to Yucaipa High School, and then I also finished out school in Mentone. So I kind of bounced around a lot. Mentone's right next to Yucaipa, but anyway. You're frozen.
There you are.
Okay. Now you're frozen again. Zzz. Try that again, Pete. Yeah, he's frozen. Well, I guess I can see where he's going with these questions. What Iowa and where I live. Call dropped. Video call. It's not showing him again.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
So I had a little technical difficulty.
Yeah, we did. It sucked.
Pete, are you okay? You still rolling?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. So talk a little bit about when you left Mason City when you were 11. Now, did your parents split up? Did you go with one parent or the other, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yep. Parents got divorced. I moved back out to California with my mom. Mm-hmm. And I moved back to Loma Linda. And then, like I said, later we moved to Reynolds, California, and that's where I went to middle school. I did kind of the elementary / middle school in Loma Linda. And then we moved to Yucaipa, or Redlands Middle School, and then high school in Yucaipa.
Okay.
Which, I really didn't have a punk scene, but I found all the punks, and it was really cool.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about. Like, so this would have been, 79, 80, right around that time.
Yeah, 81, 82. Okay. But I didn't really get into punk until probably about, like, late 83, I'd say.
Okay, and what was your first experience ever with punk rock?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. There was this kid that I became friends with. We just moved to Yucaipa, and he was a littler kid, and I was walking down the street, and he comes running up to me, and he's like, hey, can you help me out? This kid's trying to beat me up. And I'm like, what kid? He's like, some kid. I'm like, well, where's he at? And because I figured he was younger, the same age as this little kid, So I was gonna kind of help him out, put a little scare in this other kid, and it turned out to be this guy, Scott Golden, and he was a skinhead, and it's like he was a kind of a bully, but we just clicked, and it was just kind of weird how it all started because it was like. He turned me on to suicidal tendencies. He's like, hey, check these guys out. Have you ever heard of these guys? I said, no, And I listened to that and I could relate to it. It was their first album. And institutionalized kind of at the time is how I was feeling, at home because my stepdad was a deputy sheriff and he was a real asshole. He used to fucking beat me around and shit. And he did all kinds of crazy shit to me, but I could relate to the song. So it ended up, ironically, the guy I was supposed to go fight ended up being like my best friend, and to this day, I see him every once in a great while. Last time I seen him in Minneapolis at Bad Religion, it was Les and Jake at Bad Religion. I'm up on the stage taking pictures of the band, and here's Dopey out in the crowd, and I'm like, Dopey, and he's like, Jesus Christ, and it was just like, wow, I hadn't seen him for years, and I heard at one point he was in San Francisco, and another point I heard he was dead, and it was just to see him at a Bad Religion concert in Minneapolis, Minnesota was pretty bizarre. But the same kid, me and him hung out 24/7. for years. You know, we were together every single day. I mean, there wasn't a day that didn't go by that we weren't doing something. Mostly, you know, skating or going to shows. You know, I mean, he when I took him to his first show, I had a '68 Volkswagen Beetle. You know, and he's telling me about this show at the Perkins Palace in God, where's that at? Pomona? And I'm sure where Perkins Palace was anymore. So we came up with this little scheme we're going to go out tonight and do this thing. So we ended up driving to Perkins Palace, and I seen, well, no, that wasn't my first show. My first show was at the Cathay de Grande with, it was NoFX, MIA, Stukas Over Bedrock, Ill Repute, and I think there might have been one other band. That was my first show.
Was it an all ages show?
Yeah, all ages. Actually, Cathay de Grande is like, I don't know if it's still there, but it was like a Chinese restaurant. And in the basement, they did hardcore shows, which is really cool. I mean, you walk in, it's a restaurant upstairs, but you go downstairs, and it was just basically a room with no chairs, no tables, but punk bands, you know, I mean.
Yeah. Had you ever seen any bands, any normal rock concerts, in quotes, before that? Or was it your first experience seeing live bands, period?
No, October 4th, 1979, I seen Kiss at the Vets Auditorium in Des Moines.
Nice.
So that was the shit, you know.
Nice,
go from
nice.
Kiss, you know, to a stadium show, and then to the basement of a Chinese restaurant. You know,
that must have felt really different.
Oh, like, it was crazy, but at the same time, I loved it, man. I mean, I was scared because, you know, Scott, you know, our dopey used to tell me, he goes, now don't look at these guys and don't talk shit to these guys, and especially don't mess with the skinheads. Don't even look at them because they'll beat you up. And I was so scared when I went to that show. I was literally like, God, do I even want to go? And I got there, and it was just total mayhem and chaos, but it was organized and fun and structured. Nobody was out to hurt anybody. It was just slam dancing, and it was awesome. I was like hooked. That was it. I think it was shortly thereafter I went to my second show, which actually featured a couple of the same bands. MIA was there, Stukas Over Bedrock was there, but Toy Dolls from England were there, and that was just, those guys are phenomenal. You know, so my first, and that was a kind of an actual venue. You know, Perkins Palace is like an old theater of some sort, and it's fairly large. And that was where I really got a taste of what it's like to see a real punk rock show. Especially these guys from England that, you know, talked funny and, you know, hello, cheerio, and two pulp and all that stuff. And it was just like, whoa, these guys talk funny, you know. I mean, obviously I've heard English people talk before, but to see it on stage, you know, it was like live right there. I was hooked. That was it. That was the beginning. I mean,
so you really quickly were seeing shows live and participating sort of in this scene, as opposed to like spending years by yourself in your bedroom looking at records and listening to records and like sort of imagining what this scene was. You kind of like, because you were living where you were living, you jumped right into it. And did you feel like a sense of community and belonging and that sort of thing right off the bat? Or because I think maybe some other people, you know, who didn't live in California, who lived in Iowa, might have had a bit of a different experience, you know, like getting turned on to the records and all of that, but kind of like, you know, where's the rest of the people who are into this? I mean, were there friends of yours at school other than Scott who was into punk rock, or was it kind of a separatist thing within your peer group at school?
Well, not so much in Yucaipa. Yucaipa was basically me and Scott and Sid and, you know, a few other guys that were, a couple of guys were skate punks, so they kind of were more into like the mellower, you know, Agent Orange, which I like Agent Orange, but just kind of like, you know, they weren't really into the Exploited and the GBH and, you know, Dead Kennedys and Circle Jerks and, you know, Bad Religion and Minor Threat and all the really hardcore ones. But yeah, there were a few punks in Mason, but most of them were in Redlands, which is, you know, about like 7 miles away from Yucaipa, and we all knew each other for probably at least 5 different towns. We got together on a regular basis. You know, there were people from Upland, there were people from Highland, there were people from San Bernardino, you know, Redlands, because there was such a small amount of punks at the time in our area that really you had to travel. You know,
Yeah.
You had to travel to just hang out with your peers. So we'd either go there or they'd come here, and we'd hang out for the weekend or whatever the case may be. But as far as the punk rock and going to the shows and feeling welcome, I think after the fact that I didn't get my ass kicked at the Cathy DeGrande and everybody there accepted me as a punk, and even though it was like my really first experience, Dopey, I remember he's like, here, put this on and put this shit in your hair and, just try to play the part, because if they find out you're not a punk, you're in trouble. It really had me terrified. So I had the whole attitude there. I'm at the show and I'm being kind of like a dick and, what are you looking at kind of thing, But at the same time, I'm like, this is freaking awesome. Like I said, the first show, No Effects, that was the first, I think that was the year they got together. They were, I'd say 16 and 17, and they're playing these big shows. In fact, I talked to No Effects in Mankato years later, and I talked about that show, and they're like, holy crap. You were there? That was like one of our first shows. That was like actually their first show they ever played with anybody that had an album out. So, that was pretty amazing to hook up with No Effects years later, and they remember that show because that was something that stuck in their minds. So it was, but no, I think all the punks were kind of outcasts, and I think they knew that, so they stuck together because for one reason or another, they were into punk because of whatever reason it is that, for me, it was just being from Iowa and living in California and not being able to make friends with people because I wasn't from California, and I wasn't a jock, and I wasn't a mod, or I didn't have any affiliation with anything. I wasn't a dirthead. I didn't listen to metal, and then I when punk came around, it's like, whoa, fuck, it's great. And then I met some punk, and it's like, hey, me and you are friends, and then I met another punk, and I'm like, look, there's a punk. Let's go talk to him. Hey, I'm so-and-so, and, and then next thing you know, you're meeting their friends, and your circle of friends just gets huge, and it's like, wow, this is the shit. So I think, a lot of people were into punk because of, maybe it was parent problems or social problems, or, maybe they were like me. They weren't from California and wasn't accepted by the California quote unquote high school community. You live out there, you know what it's like. It's a different world out there, man. It's cliques. Everything's social cliques.